The Bell Witch, based on true events. Adams, Tennessee, 1807 to 1821. In the rolling hills of early 19th century Tennessee, John Bell's family lived quietly on a 300-acre farm in the small settlement of Red River, later known as Adams. John, his wife Lucy, and their children were respected, God-fearing people. They had cattle, fields, and a modest but prosperous home. But in the fall of 1817, something came to their land, something unseen, intelligent, and full of hate. It began with sounds, scratching inside the walls like claws. Then came thumping on the floorboards, chains dragging across the attic, and knocking on doors, but no one was there. At first, John Bell searched for rats. Nothing. The children blamed each other, but the noises grew louder, heavier. Then the voices came. At night, a disembodied voice echoed through the house. At first, just moans and whispers, but soon it spoke in full sentences, clear and mocking. And it had one target above all, John Bell. The voice called itself many names, but it most often referred to itself as Kate. It claimed to be the spirit of a neighbor woman, Kate Batts, who believed John had cheated her in a land deal. She had vowed on her deathbed to haunt him. Whether or not this was true, Kate, or whatever it was, seemed to know everything about the family. She imitated voices, revealed secrets, and recited Bible verses from memory. Her voice shifted from soft and lilting to low and growling. She slapped the children, pulled hair, and choked John Bell in his sleep. His daughter Betsy was especially tormented, yanked from her bed, stuck with pins, even dragged by her hair across the floor by an invisible force. The entity forbade her from marrying her fiancé, and when the engagement ended, the attacks intensified. Neighbors came to witness it for themselves. Some heard the voice. Others felt themselves pushed or slapped by something they could not see. Ministers were called. Exorcisms failed. Guns were fired into empty air. Even Andrew Jackson, who later became president, reportedly visited the Bell farm. His men brought horses and tents. That night, the entity mocked them relentlessly, terrifying the soldiers, rendering their wagon immobile, and finally sending them fleeing by morning. For 4 years, the Bell Witch tormented the family, but John Bell suffered the most. His health declined rapidly. He developed tremors, seizures, and swelling in his face and tongue. The entity said often, "I will kill John Bell." And in December 1820, he was found unresponsive, dying. The family found a vial of strange liquid near his bed. The spirit spoke loudly and proudly in the house. "I gave him that medicine. He will never rise again." John Bell died that night, and to this day, his death is the only case in U.S. history officially recorded as caused by a spirit. Afterward, the entity quieted, but never fully left. It returned briefly in 1828, claiming it would return again in 7 years. Locals still report activity near the Bell Witch Cave, part of the original Bell property. Visitors hear footsteps behind them, voices in the dark, and some are even scratched or pushed. The land remains quiet, thick with trees and silence, but no one dares stay after dark, because the Bell Witch kept her word, and she still might be listening. The Voice on the Line, based on true events, Pierce County, Washington, 2007. It started with a simple call. A high-pitched voice on the other end of the line said only one word, "Die." Then the line went dead. At first, the Kuykendall family thought it was a prank. Their teenage daughter Courtney had just switched phones. Maybe someone got her number and decided to be cruel. But the calls continued. Voicemails, dozens of them. some with static, others with distorted voices, always saying the same things. Watch your back. We see you. Die. Then it escalated. The calls came at all hours, often from their own numbers. The family would be sitting together, and one of their phones would ring. The screen would display their own home number, or even each other's names. When they answered, they'd hear recordings of private conversations, things they'd said in their house, or moments earlier in the car. It became clear. Someone was listening. Then came the sightings. Courtney swore she saw a shadow outside her window, watching. Another time, the family returned home to find the house's lights turned on, though they were sure they'd turned them off. Once, they found a message carved into their car, the word "die" scratched into the paint. The police were called. Investigators traced the calls. The results were chilling. The calls were coming from inside the Kuykendall's phones. Somehow, someone had hacked their devices, turned them into listening tools. The stalker could hear everything. He knew what they wore, what they said, where they were going. At one point, Courtney told her mother she was going to the mall. The stalker left a voicemail minutes later saying, "I liked the blue shirt. You looked good in it." The family stopped using their phones. They unplugged them, bought new ones, switched carriers, moved locations. Nothing worked. The stalker always found them. Then came a horrifying message left on their answering machine. A distorted voice whispered, "We live under your house." Police searched the crawl space. There was no one there, but dust had been disturbed. Nails were bent. Something or someone had been inside. The FBI got involved. Phone experts determined that the family's phones had likely been infected with spyware, granting remote access to microphones and GPS. No one could trace the origin. It was possibly a skilled hacker or someone close to them. One theory claimed it was a school friend playing a prank gone too far, but no charges were filed. The case faded, unresolved. Eventually, the calls stopped, just ended. No closure, no name, no justice. But Courtney and her family never forgot. They kept every voicemail, every police report, and even years later, they refused to keep cell phones in their bedrooms. When asked in an interview how it felt, Courtney said only this: "It's like being hunted and never catching who's behind you." The Ghost in the Boot, based on true events. Lancashire, England, 1970s. After Private Andrew Holloway was killed in a road accident during training, his mother, Margaret, couldn't bear to part with his things. She kept his room exactly as he'd left it. Books neatly stacked, medals framed on the wall, uniform pressed and hung. But most of all, she treasured a single object: his left army boot. The right one had been destroyed in the crash. The left, scuffed and solid, sat on a shelf in his room. She dusted it regularly. Sometimes she would sit in the room and talk to it, not because she believed he was there, but because she couldn't accept that he wasn't. For over a year, the house was silent. Then the boot began to move. The first time Margaret noticed, she assumed she was mistaken. The boot had been facing forward on the shelf the day before. Now it was turned slightly sideways, pointing toward the doorway. She corrected it. Days later, it was back to the odd angle. She asked her husband. He hadn't touched it. Weeks passed. The boot began appearing in different parts of the room, once by the window, once on the floor near the bed. No one had moved it. No one had even entered the room. Then came the noises. Thuds in the hall, floorboards creaking in the night, a distinct heavy-footed step. Just one. Then silence. Margaret's husband, a quiet and practical man, refused to believe it. "We're imagining things," he insisted. "It's grief." "We're raw." But Margaret had started locking the room at night. The boot still moved. Finally, in desperation, they called a local spiritualist, an old woman known in the village for sensitive work. She sat in the room for hours. She didn't speak until nightfall. Then she whispered, "He doesn't want the boot in here. It's a part of him. He wants to leave, but he's tethered." Margaret cried. The spiritualist advised her to bury the boot somewhere peaceful. Give it to the earth. Let him walk home from there. They did. She and her husband hiked to the edge of the moor where Andrew used to walk with his dog as a child. They dug a small hole and buried the boot at sunset. No prayers, just quiet. That night, the house was still. It remained still after that. But sometimes, Margaret said, when she sat on the porch at dusk, she could swear she heard footsteps coming up the gravel path. Just one boot, heavy on the earth, coming home. The Screaming Forest, based on true locations and reports. Pluckley Village, Kent, England. The village of Pluckley sits tucked in the green hills of Kent, the so-called Garden of England. Charming cottages line the quiet roads. Ivy climbs old brick walls. It looks like something out of a storybook. Peaceful, sleepy, until night falls. Then it becomes something else entirely. For over a century, Pluckley has held the reputation of being the most haunted village in England, even listed in the Guinness Book of Records. But it's the forest just outside the village, known as Daring Woods, or more fearfully, the Screaming Forest, that holds the darkest reputation. And people who go in at night often don't come out the same. The trees there grow too close, like they're pressing in. The canopy is thick. Sound is muffled. Even your own footsteps feel distant, like you're not walking through the forest, but being swallowed by it. The name Screaming Forest isn't just local folklore. Many have heard the screams, long, distant, human-like wails echoing through the trees, especially on still, foggy nights. Paranormal investigators have recorded unexplained voices, sudden temperature drops, and distorted EMF readings. One team reported a woman's voice whispering from behind them, though thermal cameras showed no one there. Their footage later captured what looked like a pale face behind a tree, watching them, blinking. Others haven't been so lucky. In 1997, two teenagers dared each other to spend the night in the forest alone. They brought a tape recorder and flashlights. In the morning, only one came out. The other was found hours later, curled into a ball under a tree, unresponsive, whispering something over and over that no one could quite understand. He was institutionalized shortly after. When doctors pressed him about that night, he said, "It didn't like me watching. It didn't want me to see what it was. It followed me, and then it screamed." Some say the forest is a gateway, a thin place between this world and the next. Others believe it's haunted by the souls of those who died in Pluckley over centuries. A highwayman impaled by a sword and pinned to a tree. A teacher who hanged herself in the woods after losing her child. A woman in red seen gliding between the trees, vanishing into the fog. Even in daylight, people report strange occurrences. Compass needles spin wildly, birds fall silent, phones glitch. One man claimed to see an entire figure walking backward, unnaturally smooth, before it disappeared behind a tree, leaving behind only a deep gouge in the bark as if clawed. And at night, the screams return. Local legend says if you walk into the woods alone and call out your own name 3 times, you'll hear something answer, but it won't be your voice. Even skeptics walk into the Screaming Forest with bravado and leave whispering. The Footsteps in the Snow, based on true events, Bavaria, Germany, 1922. The Hinterkaifeck farm sat isolated in the Bavarian woods, far from neighbors, cloaked by thick pine and snow. In 1922, it was home to Andreas Gruber, his wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria, Victoria's two children, and the family's maid. The farmhouse was modest, sturdy, and surrounded by silence. 5 days passed before anyone noticed something was wrong. Neighbors began to worry. Victoria hadn't come to church. The children missed school. The mailman saw newspapers piling up. Eventually, someone came to check. What they found inside the barn changed German criminal history forever. A few days earlier, Andreas Gruber had complained to neighbors of strange footprints in the snow, leading from the woods to the house, but not away. He claimed to hear footsteps in the attic at night, but found nothing when he checked. A newspaper appeared in the house that no one in the family had purchased. The house key vanished. Then came the maid's sudden resignation. She left in tears, saying the house was haunted. The new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived on March 31st. That same night, all 6 people on the farm were murdered. The investigation revealed a scene unlike anything the police had ever encountered. Andreas, his wife Cecilia, Victoria, and little Cecilia, age 7, had all been lured one by one into the barn, where they were killed with a mattock, a pickaxe-like tool. Their skulls were crushed. The blows were brutal, unrelenting. Inside the house, 2 more bodies were found. Maria, the maid of less than 24 hours, and baby Josef, murdered in his crib. But the most chilling detail came after. The farm hadn't been abandoned. Neighbors reported smoke rising from the chimney days after the murders. The cows had been fed. The dog was tied up, fed. Food had been eaten. The killer, or killers, had stayed in the house, lived among the corpses for several days. Police found no signs of forced entry. Nothing had been stolen. And something else didn't sit right. Victoria had a known, unsettling relationship with her father. Rumors of abuse. Her husband had supposedly died in the war, but no record confirmed it. It was also whispered that Josef, her 2-year-old son, may have been her father's child. Theories flew. A vengeful lover or rejected suitor? A disgraced soldier returning from the war? An angry relative seeking revenge? Or someone who lived nearby, watching the family for weeks? Despite hundreds of interviews and even exhumations, no one was ever arrested. In time, the farmhouse was demolished. During demolition, workers uncovered something buried beneath the floorboards. The murder weapon, the bloodied mattock, wrapped and hidden. As of today, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of Germany's most chilling unsolved crimes. Locals still speak of the footsteps, of the strange lights seen near the woods at night, and of the silent, snow-covered farm where something or someone waited in the attic for the Grubers to go to sleep. The Vanishing in the Water Tower, based on true events, Los Angeles, 2013. The Cecil Hotel stood tall on the edge of downtown Los Angeles, a grim gray monolith overlooking Skid Row. Since its opening in 1924, the hotel had collected a bloody history. Serial killers had stayed there, suicides had taken place in its rooms, and locals called it cursed. But by 2013, the Cecil was marketing itself to budget travelers and backpackers under a new name, Stay on Main. Elisa Lamb, a 21-year-old college student from Vancouver, checked into the hotel on January 26, 2013. She was traveling alone, a solo journey down the West Coast, and blogging along the way, posting photos, thoughts, and small moments from her trip. She was bright, curious, and introspective. She had also been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but her posts never hinted at anything alarming. On January 31st, Elisa was supposed to check out and head to Santa Cruz. She never did. Her family hadn't heard from her. Calls went unanswered. Days passed. Police were called. Posters went up. But there was no trace of her, no phone activity, no credit card use. Then the hotel released the elevator video. It showed Elisa alone in the hotel elevator just hours before her disappearance. And it was strange. She enters, presses multiple buttons. The door doesn't close. She steps out, peeks down the hall, then quickly retreats. She hides in the corner. At one point, she appears to speak to someone outside the elevator, though no one is seen. Her arms move erratically, in a way that doesn't look natural, like she's swimming through air. Then she leaves. The doors finally close. Millions watched the video online. People began obsessively analyzing it, frame by frame, searching for answers. Was she playing a game? On drugs? Was someone out there? But then came the worst part. 2 weeks later, guests began to complain about the water. It tasted strange. Water pressure was low. A maintenance worker climbed to the roof to check the tanks. What he found horrified him. Elisa Lam's body was floating in the water tower, naked, decomposed, and alone. The tank's hatch was heavy and difficult to open. The rooftop door was alarmed and locked. The tanks were tall, with no ladders inside. There were no signs of trauma. Her death was ruled an accidental drowning. But how did she get onto the roof? Why did no alarms go off? And what happened in that elevator? Theories exploded. Some believed she was having a psychotic episode. Her medication was found, but toxicology showed she may have skipped doses. Others believed someone had followed her, manipulated her, and disposed of her. A few pointed to supernatural links, the Cecil's grim past, dark energy, the similarities to the Korean horror film Dark Water, even a tuberculosis test happening in LA at the time called the LAM ELISA test. Too many coincidences, none with answers. Elisa Lam was buried in Vancouver by her family in quiet grief. The Cecil Hotel closed shortly after, but reopened under yet another rebranding. Tourists still visit. Urban explorers sneak onto the roof. The elevator video still circulates, unsettling those who watch it late at night. Theories fade, new ones rise. The real story, if there ever was one, drowned in that tank with her. The Watcher, based on true events. Westfield, N 2014. The house on 657 Boulevard looked like something out of a magazine. Clean white columns framed the porch, ivy curled politely around the stone, and warm yellow lights glowed behind tall windows. For Derek and Maria Broaddus, it was perfect, a forever home. They had 3 young children, and this quiet New Jersey suburb promised the peaceful life they'd worked so hard for. On their 3rd night of painting walls and moving boxes, Derek stopped by alone to finish up. It was late, around 10 p.m. The house, empty and echoing, already felt like it belonged to them. He walked to the mailbox on the edge of the lawn, expecting junk mail or a welcome note. Instead, he found a white envelope. No stamp, no return address, just one word handwritten on the front, the new owner. He opened it, smiling faintly at first. That faded as he read, "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father in the 1960s. Now it is my time." Derek stood motionless under the porch light. The letter went on, observing details no stranger should know. "I see you've already had contractors in to work on the home. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have you found what's in the walls yet? In time, you will. And then the part that made his stomach clench. I have seen your children. I count 3 so far. Are there more on the way? Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Who am I? There are hundreds of cars that drive by each day. Maybe I am in one. Look out any of the windows and see all the people who stare back at you. Maybe I am one. Welcome, friends. Let the watching begin. Derek backed away from the mailbox. The stillness of the neighborhood now felt unnatural. Every window across the street, every shrub, every parked car, they all felt like eyes. He drove straight home and called the police. An officer read the letter silently and frowned. Do you have any enemies? He asked. Derek shook his head. More letters came. They knew the kids' nicknames, where they played, and which rooms were theirs. Sometimes the letters would arrive the day after the family visited, confirming someone was watching them in real time. Maria, already anxious about the move, began to unravel. She couldn't sleep. She had nightmares about her children being taken. At one point, she grabbed one child in a panic after hearing a noise, convinced someone was inside the walls. Because the letter had asked, have they found what's in the walls yet? The police brought in FBI profilers. The neighborhood was canvassed. Even DNA from the envelopes was tested. They interviewed an older neighbor suspected of eccentric behavior. Another had chairs facing the Broaddeuce's lawn, but no arrest was ever made. And the letters continued. You have changed the house and made it so fancy. It cries for the past and what it used to be. It cries for the time when I roamed its halls. Eventually, the Broaddeuces gave up trying to live there. They sued the previous owners for not disclosing the threat. They installed cameras, sold the house at a loss. But the watcher was never caught. To this day, no one knows who it was. The story became national news, and still, people drive past 657 Boulevard. Some take selfies. Some dare each other to knock. But residents keep their distance, and a few still whisper that the letters never stopped. Sometimes at night, under the street lamp, people say the mailbox flickers and waits. The Greenbrier Ghost, based on true events, Greenbrier County, West Virginia, 1897. In the quiet hills of Greenbrier County, West Virginia, young Zona Heaster lived a simple life with her husband, Edward "Ed" Trout Shue. They married in 1896, and by all accounts, it was a happy start. But the joy was short-lived. One bitter January night in 1897, Zona suddenly fell ill. She complained of terrible pain and weakness. Within days, she was dead. The local doctor declared the cause, natural causes, perhaps a miscarriage or infection. Ed Shue, grieving, arranged a swift burial. But Zona's mother, Molly, was not convinced. She claimed that Zona's ghost appeared to her, restless and filled with fear. The spirit told Molly that Ed had murdered Zona, strangling her to death. Terrified but determined, Molly took her story to the local magistrate. The judge, skeptical but intrigued, allowed a reopening of the case. When the body was exhumed, the autopsy revealed startling evidence. Marks on Zona's neck, consistent with strangulation. The doctor confirmed she had been smothered. Confronted with the evidence, Ed Shue confessed to the crime. What made the case extraordinary was that the court accepted Molly's testimony about the ghost as part of the evidence, effectively using a ghost's word to convict a murderer. The case became famous nationwide, dubbed the Greenbrier Ghost. Zona's restless spirit, it seemed, had ensured justice. Even now, locals retell the tale, and some say Zona's ghost still walks the hills near her old home, a guardian against injustice. The silent twins, based on true events. Wales, 1970s to 1980s. June and Jennifer Gibbons were born in 1963 in a Welsh town where they were instantly inseparable. From the start, they spoke only to each other in a secret language, a bizarre blend of English, Welsh, and made-up words that no one else could understand. As children, their silence around others was eerie. They refused to communicate with teachers, classmates, or family members outside their twin bubble. They whispered, giggled, and schemed, but no one could break through. Their bond was both profound and suffocating. As they grew older, their world shrank. They became increasingly withdrawn and isolated. They believed the outside world was cruel and untrustworthy. Their secret language deepened, and their actions turned darker. They committed petty crimes, vandalism, theft, arson, but only together as if their identities were fused. In adolescence, they began writing journals filled with disturbing stories, violent fantasies, and threats against others. Psychiatrists labeled their condition folie à deux, a shared psychosis. At 16, after a series of escalating behaviors, they were institutionalized at Broadmoor Hospital, a high-security psychiatric facility. There, under careful watch, the twins spoke less and less. They communicated almost exclusively with each other, in a world no one else could enter. Jennifer once confessed, "If one of us dies, the other will live a normal life." They made a pact. Then in 1993, Jennifer suddenly fell ill. She stopped eating, became mute, and grew weaker by the day. Doctors diagnosed her with acute myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, but the cause was unclear. On April 7th, Jennifer died at 29. Almost immediately, June changed. She spoke for the first time in years. She began interacting with others. She left the hospital, enrolled in university, and tried to live a normal life. June later said, "When Jennifer died, I finally felt free." The twin story remains deeply unsettling, a rare and tragic example of two souls entwined so tightly they could barely exist apart. Some believe Jennifer's death was psychosomatic, the power of their shared mind too strong to survive separation. Others think it was a release from an unbreakable prison of silence. Their story inspired books, plays, and documentaries, a haunting look at identity, loneliness, and the power of connection. And at night, when the wind whistles through their old neighborhood, some swear they hear two voices whispering secrets. One fading, one newly born.